I'm Bill Moyers. Tonight we're going to take a close look at the connection between money and government. You may want to put your children to bed. It's not a pretty picture. The influence of money is why millions of Americans have abandoned the political process. They see that Washington has become a mercenary culture where the vote doesn't matter as much as the dollar. Public policy is determined more by campaign contributions than by merit, debate, or deliberation. There may be no better example of this than what has become the most expensive scandal in our history, the savings and loan disaster. It was a carefully calculated raid on the public treasury, bought and paid for by campaign contributions. Producer Martin Curran reports how this colossal ripoff was in fact an inside job.
Out here we have the secretarial bay. These are all high-class secretaries, right, Sue?
Right.
And we would, Anne-Marie, we would probably have, I would think, the highest caliber girl in town. They stand in line to come to work here. It's probably because of the pay. It might be because
Charles Keating may turn out to be the biggest bank robber in American history.
Talk to him. Tell him how you like it here. Have you ever asked me for a raise?
Never.
No. How old are you now?
But he sure was a
31.
good boss.
Okay, you're going to be the first girl that started off as a secretary to make $100,000.
In what year? In
We'll
1990.
start you right now, raise you to $100,000.
Gosh, we
Raises like this were nothing special at Lincoln, because Keating wasn't spending his own money. It was the taxpayers. He stole it fair and square.
The RTC has taken over 690 failed thrifts with $360 billion in assets.
It all began in this room in the spring of 1980. To some who witnessed it, what happened here in the House Banking Committee was the crime of the century.
It was carefully considered, it was carefully plotted, and it represented anything but an accidental hand going into a till.
Congressman Jim Leach of Iowa watched it happen. He was a junior member of the Banking Committee when the issue of deregulating the savings and loan industry was first raised.
An industry that had historically served the little guy, that is the family homeowner, was given the right to make direct investments, to invest in commercial real estate itself or anything else itself in certain states. In other words, use federally insured deposits to buy Wendy's or to buy stock or to buy commercial real estate, all in its own name, to speculate. And that kind of power had never been given an insured financial institution in America's history.
S&L deregulation was one of the most disastrous policy moves you've ever had in this country. And it was a mistake that was bought and paid for by money from banks and S&Ls and big special interests who gave campaign contributions and got something in return.
And how they gave. While House and Senate banking committees were debating deregulation, savings and loan PACs reported more than $2 million in contributions to committee members. House Committee Chairman Fernand St. Germain was an industry favorite. He alone received nearly $150,000 from S&L PACs in just the first 5 years of deregulation. St. Germain would prove himself the industry's most loyal ally. The robbery began on March 27, 1980. In a late-night banking bill conference, St. Germain inserted a seemingly minor amendment raising deposit insurance.
Originally, deposit insurance covered only $40,000 in a deposit. In the middle of the night, at a private meeting between House and Senate negotiators, the amount was raised to $100,000 at the insistence of Freddie St. Germain. Why was this important? This meant now that much more money would be coming into S&Ls that they could speculate with, and there'd be Uncle Sam backing it up.
Well, the insured deposit thing came suddenly. No one was aware it was on the table, and all of a sudden it was like a momentum that couldn't be blocked. It had not been carefully thought through.
But if you have deposit insurance with taxpayer money at risk, you have to have very strong regulation. They doubled the deposit insurance and took the regulatory cop off the beat. You actually had a decline in the number of bank examiners. Not just the rules were changed, but they pulled the enforcers off the track of these S&Ls.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the Secretary of the Treasury.
The campaign to free S&Ls from the burden of government regulation culminated in this happy Rose Garden ceremony in 1982.
It means help for housing.
For the signing of the Garn-St. Germain bill.
All in all, I think we hit the jackpot.
Well, it was so appropriate that he used a gambling metaphor, because what happened was a whole platoon of riverboat gamblers came in, took over many S&Ls, and gambled the money away.
In retrospect, Garn-St. Germain, of which had some provisions that were considered reform and reasonable, had other provisions which were of towering dimension. And the new powers authorized the savings and loan industry were of such extraordinary magnitude that Congress should rue the day it passed the bill.
With the signing of Garn-St. Germain, the once sleepy S&L industry had been transformed into a speculator's paradise. The age of the high-rolling banker had begun, with the fox left guarding the henhouse.
The most important people in Washington, in this country, entrusted with watching the savings and loan industry, making sure there were not excesses and abuses in terms of improprieties. Those regulators came from the industry and they went back to the industry. We did a study we're still working on. We found that roughly half of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board officials and half of the FSLIC officials either came from the industry or they went back to the industry.
So it became almost impossible to tell who the regulators were and who the regulated were.
That's right. It all becomes a blur after a while.